Sego Ani Buju Endio Wachea Kwe. As the mayor of the city of Kingston, I offer these words in the spirit of this gathering. Let us bring our good minds and hearts together as one to honor and celebrate these traditional lands as a gathering place of the original peoples and their ancestors who were entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. It is with deep humility we acknowledge and offer our gratitude for their contributions to this community, having respect for all as we share this space now and walk side by side into the future. So we were just meeting in a committee of the whole closed meeting. We discussed several items with respect to QP negotiated settlement, the local planning appeal tribunal appeal of 223 Princess Street, and also Clyde Industrial Park. So I will ask for a motion to waive our procedural rules and have the clerk report, please.
Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Osterhoff, that Council rise from the Committee of the Whole closed meeting, that the rules of bylaw number 2010-1 as amended be waived, and the city clerk report.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Osterhoff, that Council ratify the collective agreement and authorize the Mayor and City Clerk to execute the agreement between the Corporation of the City of Kingston and the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 109, for the period of January 1, 2021 to December 31, 2023.
All those in favor? There it is. Thank you. Okay, now we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, thanks, folks. We want to move to the approval of the addeds. I don't actually have a copy of the addeds, so I was just asking Madam Deputy Clerk what's on there. So we have an additional delegation, Bruce Bursey, and we also have an information report on the Love Kingston Marketplace. So I will ask for a mover and seconder for the addeds, please. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Doherty. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on. Are there any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Councillor Bowman.
Worship and through you, I, Ryan Bowman, with the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 3, Report number 24. As an employee of Utilities Kingston, it may be perceived that I have a conflict with Report 24, Clause 3, insofar as it relates to Utilities Kingston. And one more. I, Ryan Bowman, with the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 1, 2, 3, 4, para 15, in the report number Committee of the Whole. As an employee of Utilities Kingston, it may be perceived that I have a conflict with the Committee of the Whole report insofar as it relates to Utilities Kingston and the associated bylaws of those clauses. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Councillor Neal.
Sorry, I lost my arrow. Councillor Neal of the City of Kingston, declare my potential pecuniary interest in the approval of the budget, since my daughter is an employee of Kingston General Hospital, and there is a provision in the budget for funding of the hospital foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you. 1 second. Okay, I, Rob Hutchison of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of City Council Meeting 06-2021 Committee of the Whole, item 4, page 17 in the 2021 City of Kingston Municipal and Capital Budgets. Community Services, Long-Term Care Requisition, as my mother is a resident of Rideau Crest Home, and also the Chief Administration Office Strategic Initiatives Budget Requisition, as I have family members employed by St. Lawrence College. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other interest? Yes, Councillor Ostroff.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. I, Gary Ostroff of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my potential pecuniary interest in the matter of Clause 4, report of the Committee of the Whole, paragraphs 7, 11, and 15 in relation to the Kingston Access Bus Services, as I have a family member who uses these services in discussions related to the budget. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other disclosures of potential pecuniary interest, we will move on. We have no presentations this evening, but we do have a couple of delegations. So first, we will invite Abba Mortley to appear before council to speak to clause 1B of report number 25 from the CAO with respect to the equity, diversity, and inclusion update and recommendations. And just a reminder to our delegations that you have 5 minutes, and that will be followed by questions and answers from council. Ms. Mortley, welcome, and you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillors, for a moment of your time at today's council meeting. My name is Dr. Abba Mortley, and tonight I stress the prefix doctor because I recently got a message from someone who stated the importance to her as a Black person that I use it more. She stated that it exemplifies something that can be achieved and aspired to, given that I'm Black and a woman and have a doctorate in engineering. It was important to her because this representation is lacking, not just in engineering, but all professions, businesses, boards, members of councils, union leaders, and managers. With that being said, I'm also very mindful that just because I was able to accomplish my goals does not mean that the system is working for all. And the word was definitely not easy. I would like to take this moment to quote Rosemary Brown, who was the first Black woman in Canada to be elected to the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia. She said that we must open the doors and we must see to it that they remain open so that others can pass through. This brings me back to what I'm speaking to today, keeping the door open. However, systematic barriers exist such that it's sometimes difficult to even find that door. This council on July 7, 2020 recognized and acknowledged that systematic racism exists, and as per report 20-163, you set out a series of initiatives, including a review of your internal policies and processes, the establishment of an anti-racism community working group that is currently tasked to Kingston Immigration Partners, and also City Advisory Committee. I'm speaking to the latter committee today. I was fortunate to see the terms of reference that was drafted by the city staff for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee that will report to the council. The mandate of this council is to provide guidance to staff and to council of the City of Kingston in the development of policies, initiatives, and programs aimed at reducing barriers in the workplace at the City of Kingston and fostering diversity and inclusion in all areas of the organization. I believe in your packages that you have the details, sir, so I wouldn't really go through it, but this committee will be represented by various city stakeholders as well as community partners, and it will talk to those people who are specifically noted in the Workplace Inclusion Charter. With those things being said and laid out, the intent of the city is a good one, but the key to success is to ensure that all sides are engaging and participating in the conversation. This includes the members of council, union leaders, managers, and frontline staff for the city. The city has to be willing to put in the work to assess the implicit bias that we all have, and to put in measurables and to be transparent in policies and practices that would be put in place. More so, not just ticking off a box, but to make sure that these practices are also actually serving the communities that it's intended for. The intention, short, medium, and long-term goals need to be clear for all parties and must come from engagements within the communities served. Often, these communities, these groups may not seem to come from associations, but they seem to come from associations that are affiliated with the city or government funding. But it really has to be a grassroots, bottom-up approach that takes into consideration groups whose opinions and recommendations that may make for uncomfortable conversations and may require radical shifts in the way things are currently done. It is with that discomfort that the city needs to grow and the council has to commit to make change. operational and otherwise, to ensure that equitable steps are put in place. The city and the CAO have to create a culture that encourages and supports the changes that will establish a bureaucratic structure and dismantle the one that we currently have. As part of this report, there's also an ask for an equity, diversity, inclusion manager position that will report directly to the CAO to advance and support equity, diversity, and inclusion effects. Often EDI issues are often put as a side, and in order to ensure that this is not an afterthought, this is a really good step, and I hope that council supports this position and that you as council have the fortitude to make these changes and be accountable to these groups and the community so that we can work towards creating a Kingston that's more equitable and inclusive. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there questions from council? Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you very much, Ms. Mortley. I'm especially thankful because I know that the work that you're doing is involves extra burden to be a leader in the community and to fight racism and to be called to lead this work and to do it. I'm really appreciative of your time. So I have a couple questions. So regarding the membership of the Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, the report provides some information on best practices, but I was wondering if you had any suggestions for how to go about the recruitment and selection of the members of those committee members. We have a process, currently a committee selection process that is undergoing a review, but any thoughts on that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think as I mentioned before, sometimes, I know that Sam is also speaking here with respect to the community group, but I think the challenge is that often council and other members, just people in general, tend to go to things that they are accustomed to and to people that they may know offhand. And that's really the challenge. And so great that Keys and KCHC and KIP are all great kind of places to go to, but they're all kind of under umbrella and are all funded by government agencies. So I think the thing is really to have a call out to grassroots kind of associations and go to places that are not necessarily ones that you would initially be attracted to, because you need to get that diversity because not everybody is the same. And in order to have a good spread and in order to get the information and the value that you would like, I think that whatever your rules of engagement to engaging people needs to be an open process that maybe not necessary and must take traditional means, because maybe some of these people may not have access to the internet or may not necessarily follow the city. So really it has to be a new and an innovative and a different way to attract people and to let them know that this is possible so that they can be part of it. Yeah.
Thank you. And secondly, first of all, apologies, Dr. Mortley. I saw your name on the screen. I did not see the doctor, and so I made that mistake. And I should not have done that.
No.
Next question is regarding potential opportunities for council to show leadership in terms of training. Often what we're doing is sort of inward focused on the corporation, on staff. And I know that the goal is to sort of create opportunities across the community, but what would you recommend? Do you have any ideas for council as a means to sort of jumpstart this process?
Sorry, no, not needed. I think the council also has to look at a lens. So, as council people, you represent the community. And so are you looking at that lens through your underrepresented groups? Are you looking at that lens for new immigrants? Are you looking at that lens for people of color, indigenous groups, not just one indigenous group, sort of a variety? And are you taking those considerations into the way that you may be answering questions or in your responses, in the way that you look at a situation? So I think it really takes an introspective look at the way things are being done, and questioning and challenging that is that really serving everybody, or is it just looking to check a box? How do we do things so that we can get a better diversity within our council itself? How are we doing that so that for the next council round that maybe we might have somebody of color or somebody who may look different from what the council that I'm looking at is now? Are you going to put in something that's equitable that may give them a little bit of a better chance so that they can get their foot in, so that they can give a different perspective and shed light on things that unconsciously there may be biases against that people can't contribute to? And so I think just doing those practices will help to get an overall beneficial outcome for council and for the people they represent and for Kingston as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Chappelle.
Thank you, Your Worship. Dr. Martley, I was impressed with the report, but I was wondering if it was, you mentioned inclusion and bringing everyone to the table to have that dialogue. I noticed that on that list of participants, there was no reference to the business community. So with the Chamber of Commerce, that would help bridge the gap for employment opportunities, perhaps. And I attended your session you hosted recently, and Chief McNeely was an incredible presenter, and I learned a lot from that presentation. And so I don't see anything with regards to including police onto this board, and I'm just wondering if there was a reason for that, or was it design, or is it something that you're looking to expand in the future? Just some clarity would be great.
And so this board is particularly for your city staff and city councillors. They're two separate groups. So one is a community-led group that is through Kingston Immigration Partners that I think Sam will be speaking to today. And this particular group has to do with the city and how its existing policies for staff and councillors to have been looked at. So I think that's why in this particular purview, police were not necessarily included in that list.
That's Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, thank you for your presentation, Dr. Mortley. I really hear what you're saying regarding the importance of this being a grassroots, bottom-up initiative and being open to have those challenging discussions. So I'm just wondering if you could help, or you will encourage people, the right people, to apply for this, and maybe give a bit of encouraging words, but also even a reference to some people for the city to know that these are people who are really dedicated to work on this issue, and get the right people together, if you would be open to help with that.
I'm open to helping with that, but I think also, as I say, I'm just, I'm happy to help to spread that word, but I think that a lot of the onus has to come from within the city to look and see kind of where some of these people may come from, because as councillors, I would assume that many of the citizens of Kingston would contact you for different issues, and that you may have good and bad and positive interactions with those people, and then they will come with concerns. And I'm sure from all of those concerns that your offices or yourselves will be able to produce a list of people, for example, who have come up with, who have presented a different side, and then maybe reaching out to those people and saying, would you be interested? And here's what something, or do you know someone, would also be a good step from each and every one of you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, we will move to our second delegation this evening. We will I just lost my video, but I am still here. There we go. Okay, we'll invite Mr. Bruce Bursey to council with regards to clause 3 from report number 25 from the CAO regarding the Love Kingston Marketplace 2021. Mr. Bursey, you have the floor.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for the opportunity to speak this evening to the Love Kingston Marketplace 2021 report and recommendations. I'm a little dark on the screen here, so hopefully you can see me okay, but at least hear me. My name is Bruce Bursey, and I'm here this evening on behalf of the Kingston Coalition of Active Transportation. With me are Roger Healy from KCAT and Gordon Smith and Mary Jane Philp, representing the Kingston Velo Club. We are all available to answer any questions you may have. We wish to bring to your attention concerns we had with last year's design and implementation, specifically elements that impact active transportation. We have ideas and recommendations for your consideration as part of the design to be approved for 2021. As we enter the second year of COVID-19 pandemic, health concerns surrounding transportation and commuting continue to weigh on the minds of many. Consequently, there has been a significant drop in transit ridership in Kingston, as reported by city staff. More people are walking and cycling to meet their daily life needs, as evidence of this is in bike shops across Kingston. 2020 was a banner sales year, with many facing the reality of low stock and back orders to meet demand, not only for bikes, but also equipment like helmets, locks, panniers, and child carriers. Indeed, the evidence is showing more and more families are shifting to cycling for day-to-day activities. We saw this happening last summer during the Quiet Streets pilot. I'm sure councillors have had similar observations in neighborhoods across the city. All to say, we are in the midst of a significant modal shift in Kingston that we're still trying to better understand. But this increase in cycling and walking is very welcome news on many fronts. I'd like to bring to your attention some problems we observed with the design last summer. Love Kingston Marketplace is a major redesign of the Princess Street streetscape from Division down to Ontario Street. The placement of the Jersey barriers continuously down the street resulted in a significant change in the road dynamics. The barriers created a kind of funnel effect along the entire corridor, especially at intersections, that created new conflict between drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians. Vehicle speeds seemed to increase. Cyclists were required to make lane shifts from the right lane to merging into the left lane with vehicles at intersections where it was not like this before. The reduced feeling of safety by cyclists was real and created a recipe for increased hostility between drivers and cyclists. Some thoughts for consideration for this year include: the downtown needs more street-side bike parking, particularly if students are here. The design last year did not include enhanced accommodation for secure bike parking. This was a serious omission we hope will not be repeated this year. Secure bike parking is an essential element for cyclists. In this regard, we note that the Active Transportation Implementation Plan includes a commitment for 2020 to 2022 to put in place a downtown secure bike storage. Would this be an opportunity to put in place a pilot project to test the uptake and viability of secure bike parking in the form of secure bike corrals downtown? A bike rack be considered as a requirement for each patio permit, located close enough that the customer can keep constant watch of their bike. Similarly, one lane of Princess Street, the right side, should be marked with green and white sharrows, at least one per block, to facilitate easy cycle access to retail areas. Now there is only one just south of Division. The same for both lanes on King Street from Queen to Market Street and Ontario Street.
Mr. Percy, are you still there?
And to allow for better pedestrian circulation, all pedestrian crossings in the downtown area with user-activated buttons should be programmed to immediately allow the pedestrian to cross, rather than allowing the car signals to cycle through. Pedestrians spend, cars do not. We note that there will be a number of short-term street closures over the course of the summer. It's not clear from the staff report how cyclists will be accommodated. Will cyclists be permitted to ride during the street closure, or will they be required just to dismount and walk their cycles through the closed streets? And finally, for something fun, perhaps the restaurants collectively could invite the cycling community downtown for a family bike night, supporting a number of goals like environment and climate emergency, our need for exercise, physical fitness, enhanced mental health and well-being. In closing, we look forward to working with the Love Kingston Marketplace team to help put in place a design this year that will accommodate, support, and encourage active transportation in support of these important efforts to help our local businesses find ways to attract and retain customers this summer as they try their best to survive in these hard times.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Percy. We'll open it up for questions at this point. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Bursey. Quick question, because it seems like you're very eager to work with the decision makers on the specific design elements of the Love Kingston Marketplace. Have you been consulted, and to what extent, if so, on the work to date or the planning to date?
Well, actually, no. We were expecting to actually to be invited to participate in the review of a design. We haven't, and all we know is what was in the report to you. We have not yet seen any design.
Okay, well, that makes two of us. And I'm the chair of the Environment, Infrastructure and Transportation Committee. So that'll be something we can take up with staff, but could you just give us a little bit more detail on the way Princess Street could potentially be much more welcoming to pedestrians and cyclists alike in relation to traffic, the way that traffic is two-way streets with parking on both sides the way it is now? Would you recommend, if knowing nothing about what's being proposed, what would you recommend as the top three sort of ways to go to improve that experience?
Mr. Bursey.
Well, I think if others may want to jump in as well, so I certainly want to provide that opportunity to add. But I think that looking at parking is important, and where it's located. Last year, the way it was, you had to actually go onto the sidewalk with your bicycle and find your way along. And it was cumbersome. There was lots of people on the sidewalk between waiting in line to get into places, eat or at a patio. And it wasn't welcoming, and it was difficult for parking. And secure parking is really different than just lashing your bike onto a railing. We need something more than that. I think that the other thing is that at the intersections, the way that it was set up, you would normally go down the right lane, and then it was blocked. You had to then move over into the left lane, and there was one lane for cars and bicycles to go together, and then it would open up again. Well, there needs to be some marking on the street, or a way to not have it blocked, so that there can be continuous flow of cycle traffic in the right lane. I think reducing the speed would go a long way as well, as we said. In terms of right now, and I don't want to overgeneralize, but it seems that this report seems more focused on look and feel than taking into account pedestrian and cycle presence and welcoming them and accommodating them. Roger or Gordon or Mary Jane, would you have anything else to add?
It's Roger here. Yeah, I would add that I think there's a general lack of awareness of the fact that the recent household travel survey reported that there are virtually just as many bicycles as there are personal cars in Kingston. So to design the road without accommodating cyclists is just a huge oversight in the marketplace design. And when you look at the most contiguous, the downtown core, if you look at a radius of 3 kilometers from the Princess Street marketplace, there's probably 50,000 people who live within 3 kilometers. And that represents a half-hour walk or a 12-minute bicycle ride. And again, I live within that radius for sure. And I do a lot of my shopping downtown, attend concerts such when they were available, and hopefully they will be available soon. Things like movies, restaurants. all those things, including, doctor's appointments and dental appointments and going to the bank and all that stuff. I do that almost on a daily basis, and I don't use my car to go downtown. It's just not appropriate to use a car down there. So anyway, I just think there should be a lot more recognition of walkers and cyclists in the plan.
Okay. So,
Gordon, do you have something to say? You look like you might. I'm sorry.
Okay, I think I'm on now. Yeah, I think, one of our objectives is to bring money downtown, to get people spending, and cycling focuses in very much on that. If you make the place safe for cyclists, safe for their bikes, I should say, then we've achieved something. And if we can make the streets comfortable so that we can bring our families downtown and our children and our grandchildren, and we don't feel threatened, I think you're going to find a significant amount of extra spending downtown that we have not seen before. And I believe if you look at the experience in other cities, you will find that it has borne out, that you bring cyclists and pedestrians downtown, make it comfortable for them, and they will spend.
okay, thank you. Are there any other questions from council? Yes, I see Councillor Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson. Through you, rather quickly, Mr. Bursey. Last year, we also saw the implementation of quiet streets, and there's a bit of a contrast between what was happening there and what was happening downtown. Could you talk about if any of the lessons learned through quiet streets could be implemented, or maybe those were informing your recommendation? Is that part of the calculation here at all?
Yes. One thing that I learned personally, I live in Calvin Park, and the Mac Street part of the route continued all the way to Sir John A. Macdonald Boulevard to the traffic light, the new pedestrian activated crossing at Norman Rogers. Well, by using that from my house in Calvin Park, I'm able to be downtown at Barry and Princess in less than 10 minutes. So that was a very, and I wasn't alone. You could see other people were starting to learn that and use it. And I expect that they will remember that and continue doing that this year, even though the quiet street on Mac Street isn't going to be there this year. So I think that that's the interconnectivity that we have. We want it's changing the whole dynamic of cycling in Kingston, which is what we've been working towards. And I think that we have to acknowledge that and build on that. And that's why we're saying what we're saying, really.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Senek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, thanks, Mr. Burke. I just wondered, you were reading your notes, and can you forward those notes to staff so that council could have it? And I think the downtown BIA should also be given a copy, if that's possible. And
yes, I can absolutely do that.
okay, great, thank you. And then my question is, when you mentioned the Jersey barriers, so I do ask you, like, what did you say? A look and feel question, right? Are you aware of any other city that used like prettier Jersey barriers or something that wasn't so, like concrete and obtrusive as Jersey barriers? Or what do you want changed with the Jersey barriers? What do you recommend?
From what I've read in the report, it's going to be different this year. They're going to be smaller, they're going to be lower profile. I don't know what that looks like, but that sounds like it's in the right direction. And I think that it's also other cities like Toronto, for example, have used this as an opportunity for people to decorate. So you could have businesses or other groups add elements that are not too distracting necessarily, but are also make it look less like a gray, funnel that goes down the street. So that's an idea that could evolve, but I like the idea that it's going to be smaller and less obtrusive. But we need to see what that looks like.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions at this point. Thank you, Mr. Bursey, and other folks as well. With that, we will move on. We have no further delegations. We do have a briefing that's coming a little bit later in the agenda. Are there any petitions to present? Okay, we have no motions of congratulations, recognition, sympathy, condolences, and speedy recovery. We have no deferred motions, and so we will move right to reports. First up, we have report number 24 from the city.
Moved by Councillor Chappelle, seconded by Councillor Doherty, that report number 24 from the Chief Administrative Officer, consent, be received and adopted.
Okay, would anyone like any of those clauses separated? Yes, so Councillor Bohm, we're going to separate clause number 3 for your pecuniary interest. If there are no other separations, we will first vote on clause 1 and 2 together. So clause 1 is renewal of agreement, Pulse Point Foundation, and clause 2, joint procurement agreement with the Corporation of the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. So now we'll move on to clause 3. 2020 water system annual summary reports and 2020 wastewater annual reports. Councillor Kylie.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, through you to staff. The report mentioned that there were about 32,000 meters cubed of overflow at Collingwood Station in the past year. I know the report has additional information, but for the benefit of any public listening in, or perhaps even the media concerned with sewage overflow into our lake, how does this compare to previous years? Perhaps staff could give us the context of what 32,000 meters cubed actually means in relation to other years.
Is there anyone from staff that is able to tackle that one?
Yes. Through you.
Ms. Roberts. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, thank you for the questions. And with regards to the sewer overflow noted from Councillor Kylie, for that particular sewer overflow, combined sewer overflow in 2020, it was the lowest that it has been since 2015. And that would be largely due to fluctuations in precipitation.
Thank you. You anticipated my second question through you, Mayor Patterson, that it is directly related to essentially how much it rains. Is that right?
Through you, Your Worship, that's correct.
Okay, and my final question on this, and by the way, Ms. Roberts, nice to have you at council again. If you could remind council and again, those listening about how much council's committed to and over what period of time. So how much money are we putting towards rectifying this situation and how long will it take to lessen this type of environmental impact?
Through you, Your Worship, thank you very much for the questions, and it's always great to be at City Council. Thank you for the welcome. In 2019, as part of the budget report for capital, Council endorsed a 20-year strategy that starts in 2022 to eliminate all combined sewers, which is the one major source of overflows. So regarding your question about how close we are, it's a 20-year strategy. And so even though sewer separation will remove that significant source of groundwater entering the system, it won't ever completely eliminate it. And also noted in the 2019 report with regards to the finances that were provided at that time, the annual allocation from Utilities Kingston would be roughly $900,000 per year for sewer and about $1.5 million for water main work, just because we would do that work at the same time. And then also in that report, city engineering costs for the joint construction projects were between $6 million and $7 million over that 20-year horizon. Of course, these financial resources required would be updated in Utilities Kingston's next 4-year capital budget for 2023 to 2026.
All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stanek.
Your worship, that was essentially my questions, what Councillor Kiley said. It is 5.5 pages of outlines of all the sewer overflows from that station. So it's hard to believe that's the lowest that we've seen since 2015. But if the volume is, then, you know, it's just, we still have a lot of combined, we still have a lot of sewage that's going into Lake Ontario. That's the bottom line there. And it'll be great one day when we can really reduce that down to just a few overflows a year. So we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
Okay, so we will call the vote on clause 3. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, under report number 25 from the CAO.
Moved by Councillor Mclaren, seconded by Councillor Hutchison. The report number 25 from the Chief Administrative Officer recommend be received and adopted clause by clause.
Okay, so first up for clause 1A, we have a briefing. So John Bolognoni, our city clerk, will provide introductory remarks, introduce Wissam Ayad, Workplace Inclusion Coordinator from Keys Job Center, who will brief council on clause 1B, report number 25, received from the CAO with respect to equity, diversity, inclusion, update, and recommendations. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening. I'm very pleased to be here tonight. Quality, diversity, and inclusion are all important in the manner in which we live our lives. The City of Kingston is committed to making the necessary changes in order to establish an equity, diversity, and inclusion advisory committee, as well as to create a diversity and inclusion manager for the City of Kingston. The recommendations included in this report will assist the city with the opportunity to better serve and communicate with all residents of Kingston, regardless of their culture, race, and religious backgrounds. The benefits of this undertaking will better align the city's accountability, decision-making, employee attraction, and retention processes. I would now like to introduce Wissam Ayad, the Workplace Inclusion Coordinator from the Keys Job Center, who will speak further on this matter. Wissam immigrated as a professional trilingual business analyst to Canada 9 years ago. Struggling as a racialized person herself, she decided to use the strength, her education, work, and life experience to support underrepresented communities in Canada, and specifically in Kingston. Through her work at the Keys Job Center, Wissam has coached and supported many underrepresented individuals for many years and successfully introduced creative methods to help them achieve their objectives and contribute successfully to their communities. Examples of her achievements are the creation of the Begin Again group co-op for refugee women and the highest achieved employment rate in the province for immigration, refugees, and the Citizenship Canada Employment Program that are known as Destination Employment Program. Wissam, we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you so much, Mayor Patterson. Thank you, John, for the introduction. I'm very pleased to be within the city of the city council today and to give you a little bit brief about the motion to hopefully create an equity, inclusion, and equity, diversity, and inclusion. I used to say EDI, so I'm sorry. I'm trying to kind of, say it in full instead of using acronyms. So, bear with me today. I used to acronyms more. So for the creation of EDI, or Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee within the City of Kingston. So I would really appreciate if first of all, I would like to, share with you that I will be trying today during my talk to kind of alternate between my two hats. So being an employee of Keys, specifically coordinating the Workplace Inclusion Charter, but also as a racialized person myself and coming from some of the underrepresented communities in Kingston. And I will be kind of, trying to provide both perspective on my speech today kind of thing. So I would really appreciate if I can share my presentation with you today. So Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, and why we are seeing it as important. Of course, as many of us today actually have mentioned about the importance of, the city of Kingston being more inclusive and more diverse, not only as a corporation or employer in their hiring practices and, the jobs that they are offering, but also through the services that they are offering to the community, who is actually consisting of, many and different diverse backgrounds. But specifically within the current climate and at the wake of George Floyd Raleigh that we have witnessed in Confederation Park in June 2020, and when the mic actually was open to the floor, we could actually see many speakers of all different life, ages, races, offer their experience, support, and solidarity to Black, Indigenous, and people of color who have been harmed by racial profiling and racism, not only in the United States, but around the world. And definitely, we all understand that, Canada and Kingston is not immune to systemic racism. And so many have called out actually Canadians for ignoring the racism in the country over social media, since that rally, and actually it's keeping on happening. So again, knowing that the city of Kingston is not immune, the city, along with a number of community partners, have worked on initiatives such as the workplace and immigration strategy in the last few years to create a more welcoming environment for the city residents. But it's obvious there are lots of work to be still done. And recognizing the barriers to equity also exist within the city of Kingston as a corporation or as an employer, but also as a service provider to the residents of the city of Kingston. So having that said, I really appreciate the efforts that the city is taking in order to address the EDI and the discrimination and racism and systemic racism issues in the city of Kingston. And there are many initiatives that the city council kind of approved or considering for approval, whether internal or external initiative to support in that regard. So tonight, I'm hoping to shed the light on one of those initiatives, which is specifically the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee. So can we please go to the next slide? Thanks. So from my understanding, being involved with the city of Kingston in many different initiatives that they are taking right now, there are three actually initiatives that's undergoing. So there is the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee that we are pitching tonight, and it's a kind of an internal initiative. This initiative mandate is to look at the city of Kingston as both, as an employer, so as a corporate, but also as a service provider. And that maybe would answer one of the questions by the councillors around, why the business community is not presented. Actually, it is presented, but through the partnership between that Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee and the Workplace Inclusion Charter that the city actually is partnering with or is part of. So again, looking like the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee is looking at the city of Kingston from an employer perspective and partnering with the Workplace Inclusion Charter project at Keys Job Center to kind of make sure that they are reviewing and analyzing all the policies and procedures in regards to recruitment, to organization culture, to career development and retention within the city of Kingston as a workplace or as an employer. But also the other part of the mandate for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee will be to shed the light of how inclusive and diverse the programs and the services and the service model that the city of Kingston is implementing to serve the residents of the city of Kingston. And there is that third initiative that's actually undertaking as well through the city of Kingston, and that Dr. Mortley has mentioned too, which is the anti-racism working group. That's mostly of a community group that the community is leading and the city of Kingston is supporting to kind of, support with the work that the city is undertaking from a perspective of service provider. Can we go to the next step, please? Next slide, please. Thanks. So if we'll be talking about the composition of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory, as echoing and seconding what Dr. Mortley has said, we need all voices to be heard. We really want to make sure that we are incorporating in that advisory group all voices from different populations. So hopefully that the composition would consist of 2 members of the council, but up to 5 people who represent a population that faces systemic barriers to employment, as noted in the Workplace Inclusion Charter, but not really limited to those folks. So we can have people from the indigenous communities, including First Nation, Métis, and Inuit, newcomers, recent immigrants and refugees, racialized community members, person with disability, linguistic minorities, women, youth, people from LGBTQ communities, and others. Up to 4 community members who represent organizations or groups, including but not limited to the following sectors. So multicultural service, ethnocultural groups, youth, justice, legal services, newcomer settlement agencies, gender-based group, LGBTQ+ groups, faith-based organization, indigenous community groups, person with disabilities groups and agencies, and social justice groups. So as much as possible, we want to make sure that the composition is delivering and forming a safe space for all underrepresented communities to deliver their voices and being really incorporating their inputs into the process of achieving the metrics and the goals for the EDI advisory group. So can we go to the next slide, please? Thanks. So again, if we will be talking about the mandate for the advisory group, so we are looking into 2 parts of mandates. One, to look at the city of Kingston as an employer, and the other one as a service provider. So the first mandate basically, or the first part of the mandate, is to support the city of Kingston to improve their equity, diversity, and inclusion profile as an employer. So that would be through different initiatives that's actually ongoing right now. So as you might know, there has been the amazing work done by Dr. Anita Davis. Dr. Davis actually has already completed an environmental scan, and she came up with so many very comprehensive report that includes so many recommendations for the city of Kingston to improve their EDI profile as a corporation and as an employer. Also, the city of Kingston, and specifically through that group, will partner with the Workplace Inclusion Charter, and this is also ongoing. So what we are doing right now is that there is a team through the charter team at Keys who is working closely with the HR department at the city of Kingston to implement some recommendation that has been set out by Dr. Anita Davis, and that we definitely have found them very important to implement as a charter team at Keys. But also because the capacity of the team that's working with the HR department is limited to some recommendations and not all the recommendations, obviously. So what we are trying to do through that work closely with the HR department, that we are trying to, give some action planning and implementation for inclusive hiring practices and collection for demographic data, within the workforce. However, there are lots of other works that need to be done in terms of organization culture, policies and procedures, retention. And this is the thing that we are hoping that through the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee that could be done. And one of the things that Keys can offer as well is to provide another team of 2 inclusion coaches who would be representing different communities from backgrounds, and an inclusion advisor, or maybe myself, who would be working with the advisory group in terms of achieving in terms of planning for actions, but also to implement those actions and making sure that we are achieving tangible outcomes. Also, the other resource that the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee might tap on is other municipalities' best practices, of course. And I'm sure, and I know that many staff within the city of Kingston is already tapping on that resource through different other municipalities in Ontario. Can we please move on to the next slide? Thanks. So how we are going to do this, I think that I kind of, give a little bit of talk, but maybe I kind of, mentioned that slide before it came, but again, it's just briefly with the support of the Workplace Inclusion Charter, we'll be assessing the current employment practices, determining needs, working on job postings, making sure that they are more appealing, interview preparation, like the diverse panel or the hiring committee, and then hopefully with the advisory group as well, once it's approved, we can definitely work on policies and procedures, organization culture, and retention and development, or at least some of them. Maybe not all of them, again, because of the capacities, but we'll make sure that we are helping and supporting in whatever capacity that we could. Can we please move to the next slide? Thank you. So again, the other part of the mandate for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee is to look at the City of Kingston Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion profile as a service provider. And there will be many resources to support with that regard. So again, will be the other municipalities' best practices for sure, but also there is that undergoing initiative through the City of Kingston and other stakeholders in the communities, including KIP, and members of the community. It's the anti-racism working group that we are trying to establish. So there is a founding group to that working group. So there is a founding committee or founding group that's trying to put together a mandate and terms of reference for that working group, and hopefully that we would be able to launch it soon, and it will have representations from all diverse backgrounds, from all residents of Kingston, from different organizations, different equity seeking groups, and others, to kind of again include their voices and making sure that it's incorporated and integrating in the service delivery model that we are trying to achieve. So can we go to the next? Yeah, and I think that's basically what I've just said. So again, there hopefully will be some conduction of focus groups with representations from underrepresented communities to collect data on access to city services, invite input by a broader representation of community members who faces systemic barriers, review and consider current institutional practice, programs, objectives through an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens, actively foster greater inclusion of underrepresented groups and populations in Kingston, review best practice from other municipalities. Thank you so much. There is one more slide. So just to make sure that actually the work that needs to be done, as I have mentioned, there are lots of work to do and lots of coordination. There are 3 initiatives undergoing in the City of Kingston. There are lots of other initiatives within the community. There are so many stakeholders and different underrepresented groups that need to be getting all together to make that happen. And of course, it needs time and resources and someone really dedicated to coordinate all of those, efforts together to make sure that they are collaborating in the right way, being efficient, and supporting each other. So I think it makes perfect sense that we are hoping to have a dedicated resource to help lead change and liaise with the community and all the other resources and initiatives highlighted earlier. So hopefully that there will be a creation for an equity, diversity, and inclusion manager position within the City of Kingston to take the lead on the coordination between the different supports, between the different initiatives, and between the different representations from the community altogether. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Neal.
Thank you, and thank you very much for your presentation. If we could ask the clerks, as we often do, to share the slide deck with council, that would be very helpful, I think. And also, and I know this has come up before, and I've been on nominations committee for some time, but if we can ensure that all applications that come into the city for committees or anything else have an opportunity for people to self-identify as an equity seeking group, or I think that would be very, very helpful in future. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, thank you so much actually for the request. I think that this is a great thing that we are always trying to have in order to kind of collect data on different, diverse, people who are coming from different diversity and from different backgrounds. However, sometimes people are not very comfortable to share their identities, which is very understandable for sure. However, there are many, many ways in which we can collect this data when a report, where that noise from my background by any chance? I'm sorry, there was like a noise. I'm not sure if I'm clear to you all. I hope I am. Thank you. So just, putting in mind that sometimes people are not very comfortable to share their identities, which is really understandable. There are other ways whenever the relationship is established within the community, the community and the partners or the members of that, committee. I think that there will be many occasions in which we can collect those data.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation, Zayed. I just want to get your feedback and thoughts regarding the composition of the group, because it mentions, and I understand the importance of keeping groups, advisory groups, small so that you can, really make decisions. It gets complicated if it's too large. The report stated, and your presentation as well, that there would be up to 5 community members and from underrepresented groups such as, and then there were 8 mentioned, and I'm sure there are more out there too. So how do you propose we make sure nobody feels left out and feels like they are part of the table? How do you envision that?
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for the question. I think that this is really an important question. One of the things that I can definitely share in regards to, you can see that there are many diverse groups that are highlighted here. However, it's only up to 5 people, which are not covering, even the diverse groups that we are talking about. But putting into consideration that there are lots of intersectionality between underrepresented groups, so we can definitely find someone who's a youth, but also from racialized community, who's also, there are many intersectionality that we can find, and usually we find within the community, the underrepresented communities, that could help a little bit. And I think that would kind of highlight the profile of people who would like to, be members. I think that we want to incorporate as much as possible from the perspective. This is something that we can, address through that lens. But also, I think it's, to be honest, in the short term, things might change in the medium term and the long term. And if committee would build that momentum, maybe we would open up the membership down the road to more people to be representing. But I think start small and strong and steady is what we need right now, and then from there we can move forward for sure.
Okay, thank you. That really makes sense. But we have to make sure that we start in a really inclusive way right from the beginning. Right? So.
Of course, definitely. And one of the things that I would like to highlight is that as much as it is important to incorporate all perspective, but we really want to make sure that the majority of people who are represented in this committee are coming from diverse backgrounds. So that's another thing that we want to balance, in that group, to make sure that we are incorporating voices as much as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Holland.
Thank you. And thanks very much for the presentation and for all your work on this important initiative. So a couple of questions regarding the Anti-Racism Community Working Group, its role and composition. So most of the focus is on the EDI Advisory Committee, which I understand, but I'm curious, so the report mentions, and this might have to go to someone other than you, apologize if that does if it gets awkward, but the report references that the Anti-Racism Community Working Group, the founding membership, that it was led by KIP, but there's a lot of representation from Keys. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe explain the relationship there.
Yeah, sure. So KIP actually consists of 3 partners that, as you might know. So KIP is the local immigration partnership that basically consists from Kingston Keys Job Center, KEDCO or ECDAF, and ISCA. So we are the 3 kind of founding partners for the KIP. And actually the composition of the founding group is kind of, shared between ISCA and Keys, and there is a representation from the city of Kingston. So it's still within KIP umbrella because Keys is just a part of KIP.
Okay, got it. Oh, great. Okay. And so then the in your slides, in your presentation, towards the end, it shows that there's a role for this working group in the future, and the report references its purpose will be reviewed after 2 years, I think, or something like that. And I was just curious, do you see it as being, will that composition be maintained over the 2-year period? So that advisory group or committee is not changing. It's just going to stay in its current composition and advise over the coming years. Is that the purpose?
Right. Thank you so much for the question. So there are two things or three things actually that I would like to mention here. Just, going back a little bit for the first question and about, the representation of keys and the relationship between keys and KIP. I just want to, clarify that keys representations that you were mentioning is about the founding group for that committee. So that committee hasn't been formed yet, right? So it's the founding committee that's trying to establish that committee and putting in some terms of reference and mandates, and then hopefully will create the anti-racism working group that would incorporate all the other, stakeholders and, people from the underrepresented communities. So we are just, some people getting together to hopefully get this initiatives running.
Right.
And that's something that I wanted to clarify. In regards to, the composition of that group, again, you might see that there is a very huge similarity between the composition of the inclusion advisory group that we are trying to talk about today and between the anti-racism working groups, just because we want to make sure that all voices are integrated. So you would see in the composition of the anti-racism working group that we are trying, and it's not a finalized list, by the way. We are still working on that. So still the founding committee is working on the mandate and the terms of reference, and it's not done yet. However, the early version would be very similar to the composition of the EDI advisory committee that we are talking about tonight, except for the city council representation. So it would have, representations from other stakeholders in the communities, other community agencies, other diverse groups and different equity seeking groups in the community, whether through the representations of some agencies that they belong to, or as individual and activists, or ethnocultural organizations or religious organizations and others.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay. Seeing no other questions. Thank you very much, Wissam. That was great. And with that, we'll move to 1B, which is consideration on the equity, diversity, and inclusion update and recommendations. Is there anybody that wishes to speak? Okay, we will call, yes, Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, thank you, through your worship. With regards to this report, it's calling for an allocation of $90,000 from the Working Capital Reserve Fund. So my question is really to staff, if this was on the radar coming forward, we supported it in June, why isn't that $90,000 out of a separate staff budget and rather than the perpetual cookie jar of the Working Reserve Fund?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So that is a very good question, Councillor Chappelle, and I can appreciate why the question is coming up considering that we just went through the budget process. So the intent of establishing a position didn't actually come until we started to get some of the recommendations through Dr. Jack Davies as a result of the work that needed to be done internally. And I think that's where we started to see the magnitude of work that this corporation needs to do on EDI. And as you know, the budget was prepared well before that time. It was prepared late last year as we worked through the budget. So that's why it's coming through right now as a working fund reserve contribution, but will be incorporated into the budget moving forward.
With regards to the title of being manager, I would infer that they would be responsible for other staff underneath them. Since it's a temporary position, it'll be rolled up further in a future budget. Would it not be more appropriate to start it off as a coordinator position?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have a number of positions within the corporation that have the title of manager, but don't necessarily have staff. So it depends on the portfolio. This is a pretty significant portfolio. And when looking at other municipalities and best practices, most of them were either manager or director level. I think it's important that this position does have some level of authority to be able to move forward with initiatives within the corporation and with the community. Otherwise, it may be a position that is there more in administrative in nature, which is not really what we're trying to achieve here.
Now, coupled to with this position, we still haven't hired a position for an Indigenous person in the culture realm with regards to helping with the work that we have another consultant working on. So could this potentially be a combined position with an Indigenous representative holding this position as a member of a marginalized group going forward? And then that could have that same sort of role over a bigger portfolio of looking at culture as well as improving the inclusion and diversity within the city itself.
CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of things. First, council did direct staff to continue with the contract that we had in regards to the work that we've been doing with the Indigenous community. There was no direction to steer away from that and essentially create a position that would do that. Having said that, Councillor Chappell, this position would very well work in collaboration with the initiatives that are currently underway under Engage for Change with the Indigenous community. It is about diversity, and this would be something that would be directly connected to that work. As far as who would be the successful candidate, I can't say what group they would be coming from, but we would be open to any representation.
And finally, my question is with regards to the doctor, the work. How much do we pay for that consultancy services?
Commissioner Joyce.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. That contract was for, I believe, around 16,000.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, next is Deputy Mayor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the first question I have is, and this is partly because I've lost track, but is it possible that staff will be receiving EDI training in the near term, or would that need to come from sorry, did I say staff? I meant council, would be receiving the same type of training that the corporation would receive, that staff would receive, or would that have to come as a recommendation from one of the groups that's being formed?
Commissioner Joyce.
So the intention is to offer the training to councillors as well as staff.
Is the training currently mandatory for staff? Is there a policy that it's mandated?
The training will be mandatory.
And would that be the case for council?
That is what we would like.
Okay. So yeah, really that's what gets to the heart of it for me, is that, we do need to show leadership. There is a lot of work to be done. And often we don't get that sort of direction from staff or from a separate working group for good reasons, because we direct them often. They don't tell us at what we should be doing or what we need to do. And so it behooves us to know what is required to be actively anti-racist and to include diversity and inclusion in everything that we do as a council. And so I definitely want to see that there is training that is mandatory, that all of council participates in. We've had training in the past and not all of council has attended that. So I think it's really important to emphasize that point. If we're going to approve recommendations and insist that the community be engaged, we need to set the tone and we need to be leaders on that work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Okay, we will call the vote on clause 1B. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, moving on to clause 2, approval of a single source agreement with Mercer Canada for a non-union compensation review. Councillor Neal.
I may be stealing one of Councillor Chappell's questions, but I'm curious. I see this as single sourced and it's for $120,000. Can you explain what value added we get from this company for that amount of money? I'm just curious because I know we have a human resources department with staff that typically look for information on comparators in certain working groups. So I'm just curious why we're going this route.
Mr. Joyce?
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. So I'll try to put this a little more into better context. So there's technically 170 positions that are going to be reviewed and have job descriptions all fully developed and assessed, which is around, you know, if you look at the top end of what we're looking for at 121 grand, that's around $700 per. It's about 6 months of work. It's not a small undertaking whatsoever. It's very massive, which is one of the reasons why there's not many companies that have the capacity and capability to do this level of engagement with us. In this company we've worked with before, they actually conduct annual municipal salary surveys, so they're coming already with a fair amount of internal intelligence, and that's helping to keep the costs down lower. But we do require them to review all those 170 positions. So when you put in that perspective, hopefully that provides a little better sense of the value that they're coming with and that they have for us.
Now, I believe typically the non-union sector most often gets, if there's benefits enhancement through negotiation with QP or other, that the expectation is normally they receive those enhancements as well. Will this be looking at salary and benefits, or will it just be looking at salaries?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. It's a good question. It's looking at the entire salary and benefit package. So what is our total compensation package?
And my final question, so this is single sourced, but was there a public RFP, and what was the response?
No, there wasn't a public RFP. The HR staff reached out to a number of firms to assess the capability and if there's that possibility, if it would be worth doing that. And that result came back with that there weren't any other firms that we felt confident could actually handle this load of work.
So we never posted it?
No.
Beyond just making some calls?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Chappell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm really perplexed by this actual proposal within the council minutes tonight, because we had a meeting in camera about human resource issues not too long ago. This was not discussed. This was not given us an opportunity to even consider it. We have a human resources team that hire people at the City of Kingston. And if you're telling me that we don't have up-to-date job descriptions for each one of those individual positions, I'm absolutely flabbergasted. And the whole concept of actually sole sourcing this very expensive contract is ridiculous, considering we just finished our budget recently. And so I have to strongly oppose this. I'm absolutely taken aback by it. And I think it's an affront on City Council to suggest that we need to do this. So I will definitely not be supporting this. Because at the end of the day, all the consultant's going to say is you need to raise your rates and pay more. I can write the report for you on the back of a napkin.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Stanek.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, the report says that that we evaluated 67 positions in 2017. Are those 67 positions part of the 170 positions that we're doing this time, or what was the difference back in 2017? That was just like 3 years ago.
Mr. Joyce?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So the 67 is included in the 170. So they will get reviewed. I would expect and suspect that they would take a little less time than some of the others will. But I can't, sorry, I wasn't here in 2017, so I can't provide much other detail on that. But I would say logically, it's probably going to take less time for those than some of the other positions would.
Okay, thank you. Then a follow-up. So you don't know why we evaluated them back in 2017?
No, I don't have that history, sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, next on my list is Councillor Kiley.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, through you. Mr. Joyce, I understand that councillors will not be part of the non-union review, but as non-union employees, I'm wondering why not?
So this came out and it was noted in the closed session report as a outcome of the difficulties that we have been experiencing with hiring and retaining staff. So the idea behind this, that was the catalyst, as it were, for this, excuse me, was to determine whether or not our compensation packages are competitive in the marketplace. Are they aligned with the marketplace? It wasn't intended to address councillor salaries per se. That is something I know that every term that happens through committee and was last done, I believe, in 2017, where they were assessed, and that would have to come from council. But right now, that's the process that's in place. I think the city clerk could probably provide a bit more information regarding that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioner Joyce is correct. Annually, I guess a year before the end of the term, we set up a citizen committee to review the council remuneration. And at that point, we take a look at our councillors, their salaries, their benefits, the amount of work that they do. And we also do comparison with our comparators. And then a report is provided to council prior to election, which then outlines what the remuneration rate will be. So we do have a process in place. We've undertaken the process 3 times. And each time it's generated what council makes annually.
Thanks for the additional context. I actually didn't realize that it was a regular occurrence, so that is good to know, and I appreciate your response.
Your next is Councillor Hill.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. Just a couple things. I was reading on the weekend in the Globe Mail that there's a growing disparity around pay for men and women in the workplace, gender disparity. So I would assume, Mr. Joyce, that this would incorporate looking at where those disparities have kind of emerged in our pay structure in the city as well.
Yeah, I think the package, I mean, that kind of work tends to be, I would say, inherent in these companies when they perform this type of tasks. So I would expect that that would be built into it.
And my understanding is that we've had a number of positions that we've had trouble filling, and I suspect that one of the reasons for that, I would assume, is compensation. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, that would be fair.
So one of the things that and I know a study that like this, it costs $120,000. Seems like an expensive proposition, but But my understanding is that in reality, what happens is you right size your your compensation packages, which means that you spend a lot less time in terms of recruitment, in terms of sort of mishandling, I guess, compensation levels that ends up costing a lot of money down the road. So my sense is that this does really two things. It addresses the current situation the way it is, but it also allows you to try to streamline your recruitment processes such that you don't spend as much money in recruitment, as you may have with a sort of inconsistent compensation package. Is that sort of what this is intended to do?
Certainly, that is one outcome that can arise if you have, if you have a compensation package for a certain position that is much lower than what the market is currently demanding, you're going to have trouble filling that position, and then you may resort to hiring headhunter firms of the like to do that. If you've got them right sized and you're competitive and you're able to attract those applicants just by posting, then you would save those monies.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you, Commissioner Lewis. I guess in my mind, I'm just thinking that perhaps, although there's an expense to it, the outside perspective might actually help. And it's going to follow up a little bit on what Councillor Hill said, but Kingston obviously is a little bit of we are a medium-sized city. We're located between, Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa. Have we experienced, I guess, talent loss, or I guess talent poaching, if you will, in that sense? I know in the 6 years that I've been on council, there's been talk of, Kingston's a great place. People get started here and, after 4 or 5 years, they get pretty good at what they're doing. And then they sort of take off to, I guess, greener pastures or larger cities, if you will. Is that something that seems to be occurring? So are we almost at training grounds, and part of the problem is we're doing all the training and everything, but we're having the hard time retaining the talent in the end? Does that seem to be an ongoing problem?
I would say that I don't think it's a significant problem. I would say that it does happen. It has happened even recently. But I don't, up until the last couple of years, I don't think it's been a major issue here.
I guess in some key positions, perhaps it has happened. I guess if you could say offhand, like for some of the higher level positions, how long would it take before a person, like what's the learning curve if you were to talk about a manager or director? Is it 4 or 5 years before they're kind of, really competent, comfortable in their position, and kind of really starting to find where the deficiencies and everything are? Is that where would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a fair assessment, Councillor Bohm. Okay. Generally, in the industry, it's considered 4 to 6 years that it takes for a person to get to be fully qualified and competent in a position like that.
Okay. So ideally, you're looking for retention beyond that, then, to really gain benefits from a position. Okay. Just other than that, as far as why this review is necessary, is it going to look beyond just simply money? Is it going to look at other incentives as well? For instance, why people may choose to leave Kingston after being here, or why we maybe had difficulty in attracting certain talent in certain areas. Is it going to broaden the scope beyond just pure wages? It's going to look at all the other factors too in retaining and attracting talent. Is that accurate in this report?
It's certainly going to be broader than simply the salary. So it will be looking at all benefits, the culture that we have here. If you recall, we did note some of these other aspects in the closed session. So the idea behind this is it becomes a bit of a stepping point for staff to assess that complete package, to make sure that we're offering as much as we possibly can. Not only from a pure monetary perspective, but from other perspectives as well, like the quality of life here, those kind of things, bring those into our compensation package and our recruitment practices, which we do to a great extent now. But the question is there more that we can actually do in that regard?
Okay, thank you. So is it essentially, we sort of need that outside perspective in that regards then to sort of kind of look at it holistically, and then with that outside perspective, then our own internal HR department will sort of look at that and make modifications based on that. I'm just trying to understand how the whole process is going to play out.
That's pretty fair and statement that this report will form as a basis for looking at that broader picture of attracting talent and retaining our talent here.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Osterhoff.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you, Mayor Patterson. And I do appreciate this report, and I will support this, as I think that this is a very important time for us to do that look. And I'm somewhat familiar with this company. I know that they can handle this task. My questions were related to the deeper things beyond just salary. So I'm glad to hear that. It's a broader view. We're looking at work-life balance, as Councillor Bohm said, and I appreciated Councillor Hill's comments too. It does more than one thing, and so. I like this, and I think the time is right, and there will be considerable benefits for the city and for the management team, I think, in this. So I would support it. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay, we will call the vote then on, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Hutchison, go ahead.
Thank you. Quickly, did I hear from Commissioner Joyce that there were 170 positions to be evaluated by this company?
Yes.
Is that correct? Yep.
Correct.
So basically, position on 111,000 or 121,500. It's costing about $650 to $715 per position. I have to say that sounds pretty darn reasonable to me, considering all the other aspects that they're going to do. There's one reference in the list of jobs they're going to do. They're talking about internal hierarchy confirmation, I believe is the term. I can't read it because I'm looking at you. So I was wondering what that actually is.
So through you, Your Worship, the internal hierarchy is the levels that we have within the organization, the multi-levels of management that we have, and looking at that and is looking at some of the spans of the salaries that exist within those. So there's work that needs to be done in terms of tightening those up across the corporation.
Okay, thank you. I'll support this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will call the vote then on clause 2. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried by a vote of 9-3. Okay, moving on to clause 3, Love Kingston Marketplace 2021. Point of order, Councillor Chappelle.
Yes, through your worship, I'd just like to have my objection noted in the minutes, please.
Okay. So all votes are recorded and noted. Okay, so on to clause 3, Love Kingston Marketplace 2021, road closures, expanded patio spaces, and temporary pickup and delivery parking in paid parking areas. Councillor Bohm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, just in reading this, I'm sure many other people got calls from downtown business owners as well. I guess I'm just curious about the consultation and if staff would be able to elaborate on that. One of the key terms, I know there's been some adjustments and modifications. after some of the lessons learned the last time this was rolled out. One of the key things and messages that I've heard from quite a few business owners downtown actually is less is more in this regard. So I guess I was just curious, having spoken with quite a few of them now, how they were consulted or how they will be consulted going forward to ensure that this rollout is a much larger success than the last one, and how those business owners, I guess, would be able to, I guess, address concerns that came up with the rollout. So is there a mechanism for that built in here, so that are we a little bit more adaptable this time after the last rollout?
CAO Hurdle.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, some of my colleagues may want to jump in as well and add to my response. So last year, Councillor Bohm, you'll recall that we had to move fairly quickly with the implementation just because of the time that we had, the time frame when we were able to proceed with such an initiative. And to be completely frank, at that time, the city did a lot of the direct outreach to businesses. And that became, I think, probably a little bit confusing at times, where we were getting different feedback from different businesses. So this year, before we initiated this process, we have been working with the Downtown DBIA as well as Tourism Kingston to make sure that, first of all, we had a group of staff working collectively, but second, that the Downtown DBIA would be the link between the city and the businesses, because really that's, you know, businesses pay their fees to the DBIA, and we recognize that, and they have a role in supporting and representing the business interests. So we have done that, and the DBIA has actually hired, in partnership with Tourism Kingston, a resource dedicated to do exactly just that, reach out to the businesses and consult with them. Now, I'm also going to be frank and tell you that not every single business is happy with the outcome. And I think that would probably be impossible to achieve, considering that businesses have different needs. But I do know that they have done outreach, and they have been the link, and we have been putting together recommendation to council based on their recommendations. So the DBIA's recommendation following their consultation with their businesses.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So some of the lessons learned basically have been applied, which I did read in the report and everything, and then there will be consultation. Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Neal.
Thank you. And CAO Hurdle this will echo what I've spoken about before. I know the BIA is well organized. I know that they have a lot of influence in their lobbying, but please, let's make sure that if there's parking allowances in the BIA area, that it goes beyond Division Street, and businesses along Upper Princess receive some of the same consideration, or in Portsmouth District or other business areas. The recurring complaint that I've heard for years is, how come we do that for the BIA? We don't do it for other business districts. So if you can make those assurances, I would appreciate it.
CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of comments. So Councillor Neal, you are correct that you've raised this point before. I do know at a couple of meetings. We have in the last year, so the last summer and fall, worked with businesses throughout the city that have patios that are located on private properties to expand those patios. So we recognize that obviously, depending on where businesses are located, they may not necessarily be located right next to an area where there's on-street parking. They may be located in a plaza, for example, and may wish to expand on their patio. So we have worked with all of those businesses in the last year, and we'll continue to do that. Absolutely. As far as other businesses are concerned, if they're not located in the downtown area, and would like, and do not have the space to expand, I mean, we would like definitely to have a conversation with them to see how we can support them. I do want to indicate for this year, the DBIA is going to be covering the costs related to the Love Kingston Marketplace and the closures that are required, so the barriers to expand the patio. So I just want to point that out as well for council.
Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Mclaren.
Thank you. So it's interesting that it's the DBIA who's the link to you. I've heard from a few that they don't feel that they're always as consulted as they would like to be. And in that light, one particular business that has reached out to me, Dino's Barbershop, would like that you don't take away their parking spots. They claim that they have tried to make that clear. They feel they weren't listened to. So just one piece, if you could ask at least the DBIA to consult with them, at least make them feel like they're being listened to. But honestly, if we can arrange to have it so that their parking spot is not blocked, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, next is Councillor Hutchison.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. I've got a series of questions and comments. Yeah, this being mostly in my district. So just to be absolutely sure, this report and its recommendations, this is directed to the CAO, has been signed off by the DBIA, is that correct?
CEO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that is correct. Councillor Hutchison, we did receive something in writing from the DBIA.
It's good to hear. Now, I had a situation in the last effort, where the city allowed, like if there's two neighboring restaurants, say restaurant A does not want to put a patio out the front. And then we allowed restaurant B, which was adjacent, to put tables and chairs and so on out there in front of restaurant A on the street. It was in public space, of course. But I'm wondering if we're going to be allowing that again. Because this tortured me for a number of months. So, and I actually don't think that it's really fair, because it's sort of like restaurant imperialism. You know, you want the open space so people can know they can come through and come into your shop, even though you don't have a patio, but the patio of the adjacent business is taking up that space.
Ms. Lillicrap.
Thank you, and through your worship, thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. In all of the instances where we have requests for expanded patios, the transportation engineering team looks at the information block by block and is able to plot out those requests. In some instances, as you pointed out, there isn't a parking lay-by space immediately in front of a business, and so they are required to occupy an adjacent parking space, the closest to them that is possible.
That's not really the problem, okay? The problem is that there's parking spaces in front of both businesses, restaurant A and restaurant B. So restaurant A didn't want the space, okay? What they objected to was that restaurant B was allowed to take over that space in front of them. And what I want to know is if we're going to continue to do that.
Mr. Fuller.
Good evening, and thank you, and through your worship. A little more information before I respond to the councillor's question is majority, if not all of the parking spaces in lay-by areas that were occupied last year were expanded patios for restaurants and businesses that already had a permanent patio in front of their store frontage. So if we were to take the councillor's direction to not expand in front of a storefront, then there wouldn't be any temporary patios. So we are trying to work together to find a middle ground in terms of an expansion of those patio spaces to preserve some additional parking so that businesses don't overwhelm their adjacent business partners and neighbors. But there are, and we have about 58 right now anyways, temporary patios that are interested in lay-by spaces only. We anticipate 40 permanent patio operators. Some are currently in place now through the winter, although just getting ramped up again. So there will be instances that you've described.
Okay. I don't mean okay, I think it's right. I just say, I acknowledge what you say. I'm not sure why there wouldn't be additional space. If the restaurant has space in front of them, they're going to get that. I'm talking about space that's additional to that in front of another restaurant. And that seems problematic to me. And I was hoping we could clean that up this time. So going on, I want to thank you for the changes in the barriers. The complaints I got mostly were from retail stores that the way in which the size of barriers before caused problems for them were unsightly and so on. The report's clear on that. So we're having smaller barriers with planters, and that's good. We heard from the presentation about the idea of secure bike parking or corrals, and could we facilitate that? Is that a possibility? Do we have the space for it, etc.?
Ms. Lillicrap?
Thank you, and through your worship, so the Director of Transportation can join this, but I believe last year as part of the project, we did implement a number of spaces that included bike racks. So unfortunately, there were some expanded patio spaces last year that were not occupied by a business. And so we saw that as an opportunity to implement some parking spaces for bikes. So there likely is an opportunity to do that again this year. The Director of Transportation may want to add to this.
Mr. Simp.
Thank you, and through you, Your Worship. I think just to clarify, I think that the question spoke to secured bicycle parking. So the parking that we added last year was of the typical on-street where we have some bike racks that were placed in the on-street spaces. We've not looked at the details of what is in each of those spaces yet, as Mr. Falwell alluded to, though the ability to add some additional bike racks, standard bike racks, is still available to us. We still have that equipment, and we'll look at that in the overall design. Operating and managing secured bike parking is different. So that's not something that is planned as part of the 2021 season. We have operated limited secured bike parking with partners. Cycle Kingston partnered in previous years where we operated it as part of some of the movie nights in a very limited fashion. But we've not yet defined or developed a secure bike parking program for the long term or for the 2021 season.
Thank you. Question. On page 199, 328, the fees for permanent seasonal patios will be collected under normal process. It seemed to me the report said we did not collect those fees last year because of COVID and business problems, but this year we're going to. And I'm just wondering what the fundamental change is that brought that about, unless I misread it. Report, I'm willing to be corrected.
Okay, CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. So, Councillor Hutchison, you'll recall that last year, when council delegated authority to the CAO for the emergency management measures, there are a number of initiatives that were undertaken to try to help support businesses. And we did move quite quickly to try to provide that better support for businesses that had obviously quite a lot of unknowns at the time. And part of that was to waive the fees for the patios. This year in the budget, those fees were included, and they were also included in the fees and charges bylaw. What we are not planning to charge for, and I believe that's also in the report, is the space that would be occupied by the extended or the expansion of the patio space.
Okay, so we allowed we exempted that space last year, if I understand you, in the report, but we're not doing it this year.
CEO Hurdle.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, so Councillor Hutchison, that's correct. And that's because at this point, council would have the authority and would be required to waive that fee. Because staff do not have delegated authority at this point, we do not have the authority to waive that fee.
Right, but you're able to do it before because you had the authority to do things in general. Okay, that's good to know, thank you. So one last question. On page 200, it talks about the city intends to buy back the Jersey barriers in 2022. Could you explain that to me? What exactly are we doing there? What does that mean?
CEO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor, so I'm happy if any of my colleagues from transportation might want to jump in, as I anticipate they would have more details in terms of what the Jersey barriers will be utilized for. But essentially what it means is that the city will eventually purchase those Jersey barriers and utilize them for various projects that the city may have, whether they're temporary closure of streets that we might want to do in the future or other types of projects that we may want to implement. So to give you an idea, Councillor Hutchison, I believe it was Ontario Street in front of City Hall that was that had some temporary barriers as well with planters, if you recall last year. So that's an example of where we could utilize those types of planters and barriers.
Sure, Kid.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you. Sorry, I was on delay. I was trying to find my hand. So as CEO Hurdle has indicated, the city will find some uses for these barriers. There's also planters themselves that are being incorporated into the design to block the laybys. And we anticipate that we can use them for some of the local traffic calming initiatives that we spoke to EIT about last week in terms of incorporating some of the quiet street concepts into traffic calming on local roads. We can use some of the planters in and around the downtown and in other areas. So that's the concept that we are working to.
Great, thank you very much. It was just a slight reference there and I couldn't get it all. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think I have any others. Oh yes, Councillor Chappell.
Thank you, Your Worship. With regards to the patios and design, sometimes they're different from one location to the next. Has there been any consultation with Corrections Service Canada, CORCAN, and allowing our incarcerated offenders to build a standard platform for the city that could be removable and then stored at a later date and reused on a regular basis? Is there, in fact, that's a thought perhaps we can be utilizing?
Commissioner Kidd.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, We actually have not taken any steps to consider using that type of resource to assist Councillor Chappelle. One of the first step of what needs to happen is, as I mentioned in the budget presentation, is we've put some funding aside to review the patio bylaw in 2021 and to take a look at ways that we can better utilize some of that right-of-way space in the future. So staff did some research late last year with other communities and how they were using their right-of-way space to expand options like this. So we will conduct that work in 2021. We are truly hopeful that we'll have it for 2022. So one of the options, as you've mentioned, could be that instead of doing what we're doing, which is using the parking lay-bys, which are obviously a step down from the curb and right along the side of the travel lane, we're looking at options such as City of Ottawa has implemented where they build that space up, could be with raised platforms, and then shift the pedestrian traffic out closer to the travel lane and have your patios be able to expand, but still connected to the actual building space. So we're looking at a number of those options, and that review will take place, and that information can come back through to council for consideration before we make any changes, because it would involve changes to the patio bylaw when we're done.
I raise that only because I know that CorCan is always looking for innovative ways to contribute to the city, and the offenders would very much like to have an opportunity to beautify the city of Kingston so that they can enjoy the great downtown when they're released on April or what have you. So I just think that's a synergy that we should be leveraging, considering it's here in our city. And I did get a note from a constituent watching this live tonight, wanting to know if we will be permitting a patio outside the plaza. I'm asking for a friend.
So is that a serious question?
Yes, I got it right here.
Mr. Follow.
Thank you, and through you, I can advise that we have not received feedback from the BIA for a request on that block of Montreal Street.
Okay, thank you. So next on my list is Councillor Stroud.
Thank you, Your Worship. I may have a couple of questions, but I'll start out with a couple of comments. So first of all, this whole concept of closing or repurposing some space on our main drag in the downtown of Kingston isn't actually very new at all. It actually happened almost 50 years ago in 1972. I'm not sure how many blocks of Princess were closed, but at least the last 2 or 3 blocks down to Ontario Street of Princess were completely closed to traffic, and planters and barriers were used, as we're discussing tonight. I saw reference of it, of all places, in the heritage, the little heritage room at City Hall when I was on the Heritage Committee. There was a book there that had a poem written about it. I think I've mentioned this before, maybe at EITP, but anyway, we're talking about it now, and it's new to us, this generation, but it isn't a new concept. The way that you use the public right of way, before vehicles traveled at the speed that they traveled, all of Princess Street was constantly mixed use, right? So pedestrians, cyclists, streetcars, horses, carriages, all of those things shared the space. And there was storefronts that encroached on the public area, and it looked a lot more like a public market in places. There was awnings and stuff. So you can just the way that Princess Street is right now hasn't always been that way. It's really only been that way for the last maybe 70, 75 years. But in 1972, there was an attempt to repurpose it in the summer months only, for very similar purposes as what the Love Kingston Marketplace is attempting. So, and I think it's a great idea in general. I think we have to try to do something to allow more vibrant spaces to exist in our downtown. It benefits everyone. However, the execution is paramount, and that's what we're hearing from our first attempt. I'll get to the public consultation piece at the end. I just want to make a couple quick other points. So secure bike parking, as was suggested. That is definitely on the list of wishes, wants, not necessarily needs. What's needed is bike parking, period, to any kind. And I know some people don't like locking their bikes to a bike rack, but that is the most common form of bike parking available today, and everybody understands it and has a lock. And if they don't want their bike stolen, they get a better lock and so on. I really think what we need is hundreds more of those spaces for regular bikes of any kind to park. The kind of thing that they have in Europe, that's when we evolve to a more of a bike dependent place when our mode share is up 30, 40, 50%. We're nowhere near that. That's my opinion. And then as far as what Councillor Hutchison was saying about the parking spots being repurposed for patios and the storefront that doesn't want a patio, you know, I cannot totally understand what that complaint is based on. However, we should also point out that if we didn't change anything, you have parking in front of all of these businesses, and the person that parks in that parking spot doesn't necessarily go into the store that he's parking in front of. And that's the way we're using the space right now. And I'm not saying everybody understands this. Nobody expects the guy to get out of his car and go right into that store every time. But that is how we're using the space. We're using the space as a shared parking area, car storage for customers and residents alike who use the downtown. So it's not earmarked, it's public space. And we can't emphasize that enough. It's public space. So what benefits the public the most? Having one person's car parked in a space is the worst use of that space. Anything else we do with that space is better. So there's going to be lots of ideas to this effect, and it is a little bit like herding cats. And I can understand why staff went ahead during the emergency powers phase without consultation. But in the future, because we're here now, and because we've heard from members of the public in delegation tonight, and because there'll probably be a lot more, and it needs to happen in a public forum, I have prepared an amendment to allow that to happen. It's very simple. It's just ask for a report to EITP within a year. I've sent it to the clerk, and it's self-explanatory once it's up on the screen, but basically it's to allow members of the public to weigh in on this.
Thank you, Councillor Stroud. Just because your time's up, but I'm going to give you obviously the time to put the amendment up. So if I can just have that amendment go up now. Okay, so we have a motion to amend moved by Councillor Stroud. So let me read it and then I'll ask for a seconder. So that the amendment would read that there would be an additional paragraph that staff report to the Environment, Infrastructure and Transportation Policies Committee within 1 year on the information gathered from Love Kingston Marketplace 2021 to allow members of the public to participate in its evaluation in an open forum, and that staff incorporate the results of this interaction when planning further measures of this nature to improve the experience in the public right-of-way in downtown Kingston. If I can just see the main screen. Okay, so is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Doherty. Okay, Councillor Stroud, now I reset the clock, so you don't have to rush now. You do actually have some time if you want to speak to the amendment, and then we'll open up the floor.
Thanks, Your Worship. I don't think I need to speak 5 minutes on this. It's pretty self-explanatory. When it came up during the at the end of the emergency declaration, when we were passing that motion to ratify those powers, I did speak up about this, about how it was unfortunate that we hadn't been consulted as a council, and the public at large had also not been consulted. And now there's reports also that members of the DBIA didn't feel properly consulted either. All of this is understandable in an emergency, but we've got time now, so let's just the report doesn't have to take staff, you know, days and days to put together. But we do need to keep track of the work, of you know, the number of patios, the number of repurposed spaces, you know, the nature of it all. The summary is like we're getting tonight, but after its second iteration. So I'm sure they'll be collating this information anyways. Just bring it to the committee, members of the public. Hopefully we can publicize it as well. It's not in the amendment, but it goes without saying that, you know, we should probably ask for input in this fashion. And then, you know, it's all on video and in the minutes, and, you know, staff is there and there's questions can be asked of staff. Staff has a chance to respond to the questions. And at the end of the day, everyone feels included, and whatever direction we go is more readily accepted. I do acknowledge that you can't get 100% consensus on any of the measures that are being discussed. There's going to be controversy on every single one, but we can get closer to acceptance if we involve more people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll open up the floor to any comments on the amendment itself. So that's just speaking to the additional paragraph proposed, speaking to the report back to EITP on the Love Kingston Marketplace. So is there anybody that wishes to speak to the amendment? Councillor Hill.
Hey, thank you, Your Worship. And I definitely agree with some of the things that Councillor Stroud said, particularly as it relates to going forward, you know, because you have to consider what we were going through last year when this was being implemented. It was very, very sudden because the emergency situation demanded kind of a response quickly. We have had some time now to kind of reassess that, and I think going forward, you know, hopefully, and I think this is sort of what Councillor Stroud is alluding to, there are some things that are going to come out of this that we may want to make permanent, and that would really involve you know, soliciting input from the community, bringing that to council. You know, there's a process involved in that, as there would normally be. I do, though, want to speak to what happened last year, because, you know, it does suggest that people were not being consulted. And I sit on the DBIA, so one of the things that the city did was to bring 3 options to the DBIA, and it was the DBIA's responsibility then to solicit their all of their clients to find out whether or not they supported the initiative, whether they thought there were some things that could be amended, etc. And I know that we sat as a board and we voted on one of the 3 options that was brought forward by the city. In truth, and you know, that consultation that should have happened with the DBIA did not happen to the extent that it should have. It wasn't the responsibility. Although I know the city staff did a lot of consultation with lots of merchants and groups down there, the DBIA really, in my estimation, failed in that task. And I know that one of the things that the board has asked them to do this year that's different than in past is to keep track of the fact that those consultations have happened and that they have spoken to every merchant, that they've got input. And as Councillor Stroud said, we're not going to get consensus from every single person. That's not likely ever to happen. But I think I would be remiss in not pointing out the fact that this consultation did happen with the DBIA. It should have happened with every single merchant, and the fact that it didn't was I think that falls much more squarely on the efforts of the DBIA than it does on the staff, because the staff had an anticipation that the DBIA would do that work. And I think for a variety of reasons, including, you know, how overwhelmed people were. There's lots of, you know, I'm not laying the blame on anyone, but it just, that work did not get done. And I know that I've spoken to a number of merchants who felt that they weren't well consulted. I'm sure most councillors have. But I just want you to know that I think folks from the city really made a very honest effort to make sure that that happened. So I do support the motion going forward, but I don't think it should be in response to a failure in any part on behalf of the staff who really did an honest effort in trying to get that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to actually echo what Councillor Hill just said. Speaking with merchants downtown, I actually did hear quite a few speak about that they're concerned that they had not heard from the DBIA, but they actually had heard from city staff. So city staff were definitely out there speaking with merchants. So I'm glad you did correct that, because that is important. But when Councillor Stroud put the amendment forward, I didn't read it as a criticism. I read it as an opportunity to learn. And I'm sure this will be like the first review that we'll do, but after COVID, there's so much to learn going forward. But our staff and just jumped into high gear and worked incredibly hard. So it's definitely not a criticism, but a great opportunity to learn and to hear from the public. So obviously I second it. I'm very supportive of the motion.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the amendment? Okay, we will call the vote then on the motion to amend. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Now we're back to clause 3 as amended. Is there anybody that wishes to speak that has not already spoken? Okay, we will call the vote then. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to clause 4, 2021 additional property tax relief program related to COVID-19. Councillor Kylie.
Thank you, Mayor Patterson, and through you to staff. I know I've asked this before, and a few others have. I'm getting tired. I've been sitting here for 4 hours. We've asked this before, but it's worth repeating. I'm wondering about the way in which the city can encourage or compel even landlords to pass the potential relief on to tenants. I know we're talking about small businesses under $2 million, but still there are a number of situations where it could go to a landlord, but it wouldn't actually benefit the folks renting the space. In other words, the actual small business. So perhaps staff could speak to that.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we can and will make that part of the eligibility requirements for the deferral program. So it will be part of the application. We don't have any legal recourse in terms of forcing a landlord to pass that benefit on. However, if we do provide the deferral and then find out it hasn't been passed on, which I expect we probably would hear one way or another, we do have the ability then to reverse the deferral and make the taxes payable. So in that regard, we certainly have something that we can fall back on to ensure that that eligibility requirement is being met.
Okay, thank you. And if someone were in that situation or thought they were, would they just contact the city staff that are responsible for the program? How would that work? Is there a direct feedback mechanism in that way?
Yes, they could just call the call center line, the service center line, or through to our taxation department.
Thank you.
Okay. We will call the vote then on. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, at this point, I will call a 10-minute recess until 9:28, and then we will reconvene at report number 26. Okay, folks, it's 9:28, so we will reconvene. Okay, so just make sure that we still have our quorum here. Yes, okay, great. So now we'll move on to report number 26 from the administration.
Moved by Councillor Stroud, seconded by Councillor Kiley, that report number 26 from the Administrative Policies Committee be received and adopted.
Okay, so there is just the one clause, and I will just note that if this recommendation passes, then we would be looking to convene a special council meeting to discuss the amendments to the procedural bylaw. For council's information, the date that I am looking at is March the 18th. That would have been March break, but March break's been canceled, so I think that that's a good week that works. So I would follow up. If council passes this, I will follow up with an official notice this week. Okay. Anyone that wishes to speak? Okay, we will call the vote then. Yes, Councillor Stroud, go ahead.
I just want council to understand the motion, because if you read it through, it's easy to get lost. So, and it's very long, and I don't want it all read. It's just, is at committee for a while. It was deferred a couple of times. There was an amendment at our penultimate meeting. So 2 meetings ago of administrative policies, there was an amendment. That's the one that talks about section 6 to 19, 6 to 25, 619 to 625, right? That's a large part of this on the agenda is that amendment that has to do with electronic meetings during an emergency, right? And all the definitions and stuff. And then the last bit of the recommendation was an amendment at the last meeting. And it is the one that asks for committee of the whole and to discuss the aspects, because that's the direction that the committee went. And I would just say very simply, the committee agreed with my suggestion as the chair of the committee, that because these changes affect all of council and affect future councils, we really need everybody. We need everybody's voice on this, and the only way to do that is in committee of the whole. Some of the aspects might not be controversial, and we might all agree on them, and they won't take up much time. But the list there was compiled from what members of the committee had brought up and during our discussions at committee, and basically we could have made amendments on all of them at committee, but then it would have come here. We probably would have had to start the discussion again as a council as a whole, because of the importance of the changes and how they affect us. Things like, we all need to agree that on what rules we're going to use for deferral motions, because we haven't agreed in the past. And I agree that we need to set the ground rules, and that's what the bylaw amendment does, but we haven't discussed it as a council and the majority will rule, but we need to discuss it. So that's basically it. And you'll see the very last bullet, the very last paragraph of the recommendation basically leaves it open for a member of council to add to the list of things they want discussed. But it doesn't name, it's not named, it's open to that. And it would be up to his worship to run that meeting. And of course, we would be expected to draft, if we disagreed with the draft bylaw, we'd be expected to draft amendments. So there's a bit of work involved if you disagree with what's in the draft bylaw. That's about all I've got to say at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, we will call the vote then on clause 1. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to report number 27 from the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Osanek, that report number 27 from the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee be received and adopted.
Okay, so there are 3 clauses. Number 1, Accessibility Office Report, Q4 2020. Clause 2, Appointments to the Awareness and Education Working Group. And Clause 3, Appointments to the Built Environment Working Group. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to Committee of the Whole. We have, of course, recommendations from our budget meetings. So I will turn it over to the clerks to walk us through those votes, taking into account the pecuniary interests.
Okay, so Councillor Bowen, you are excused for the vote on clauses 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Councillor Bowen, if you can hear me, you can return. Okay, then we're on to clause 4, which is the deliberations and approval of the municipal capital operating and capital budgets. Councillor Hutchison, you are excused for the first vote, which will be for paragraphs 5, 6, and 12. And because we are going through these a little bit out of order from what's in the agenda, I will read them out before Mr. Mayor calls the vote for each one. So starting with paragraph 5, the council approved the 2021 general municipal operating budget, finance and administration, chief administrative office, strategic initiatives in the amount of $229,570. Paragraph 6, that council approved the 2021 general municipal operating budget for community services long-term care in the amount of $6,011,301. And paragraph, bear with me just a moment, paragraph 12, that council approved the 2021 municipal capital budget for long-term care and facilities non-heritage Rideau Crest Home in the amount of $3,043,242 as follows. Proposed capital expenditures, $3,043,242. General financing, general municipal reserve funds, pay as you go, $2,180,000. Government grants, $600,000. Contributions from others, $263,242. Total financing, $3,043,242.
Okay, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
And Councillor Hutchison, you may return. Councillor Osterhoff, you are excused for the next vote. This will be paragraph 7 and 11. Paragraph 7, that council approved the 2021 general municipal operating budget for agencies and boards, Kingston Access Services in the amount of $3,363,362. Paragraph 11, that council approved the 2021 municipal capital budget for Kingston Access Services in the amount of $377,300 as follows. Proposed capital expenditures, $377,300. Proposed, financing, general municipal reserve funds, pay as you go, $377,300. Total financing, $377,300.
Okay, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Councillor Osterhoff, you may return. Councillor Neal, you're excused, please. Okay, this will be for paragraph 8, which reads that council approved the 2021 general municipal operating budget net transfer to the Hospital Foundation in the amount of $1,050,000.
Okay, we'll call the vote. All those in favor? Point of order. Councillor Chappell.
Through your worship, I want to clarify how long this commitment continues because.
So it's not a point of order, but you do have the floor to speak to it. So go ahead.
Well, the point of order was that you were going to go to the vote and I need to speak to it. So how many more years are we committed to this $1 million contribution? Because this is coming from a municipal tax levy supporting something that the province should be supporting. And it really bothers me that, you know, for $1 million, we're putting this into healthcare where the province should be stepping up to the plate. And so how many more years do we have to pay for this?
Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I couldn't find that raised hand. I'm just going by memory, Councillor Chappell. I believe we only have maybe 1 or 2 more years on this commitment. 2 years max.
Okay. I do think this is something that maybe should go to a plebiscite at the next municipal election, whether the municipality, we should be spending money of our residents on a provincial jurisdiction. And that would be a good plebiscite question to pose to the community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will call the vote then on paragraph 8. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Sorry, folks, I forgot to unmute myself. So I'm going to now read out the remainder of the budget with the exception of paragraph 15. So starting with paragraph 1, that council approved the 2021 general municipal tax supported operating budget in the amount of $384,133,729, which is $394,787,962 less $229,570, $6,011,301, $3,363,362, and $1,050,000, which were previously approved. Paragraph 2, that City Council approve a total contribution of $1 million to be funded from the Working Fund Reserve to add the following financial supports in the 2021 budget. $600,000 for small businesses to be transferred to Kingston Economic Development Corporation and added to the existing $500,000 set aside by Kingston Economic Development Corporation to provide financial relief to small businesses most impacted by the pandemic. $200,000 for recreation and social services, not-for-profit organizations to be added to the community investment grants for a total of $420,000 to be reallocated in partnership with the United Way for organizations most impacted by the pandemic. Paragraph 3, that council direct staff to develop temporary eligibility criteria for 2021 for each fund in collaboration with partners where applicable. Paragraph 4, that council direct staff to implement a strategy to replenish the working fund reserve in future budgets. Excuse me. Paragraph 9, that any variance between final assessment growth and the growth estimates included in the 2021 general municipal operating budget be transferred to funded from the working fund reserve to offset unanticipated variances in assessment growth in future years as a stabilization measure. In paragraph 10, that council approve the 2021 municipal capital budget as follows. Proposed capital expenditures, $58,750,013. Financing, general municipal reserve funds pay as you go, $35,094,804. Working fund reserve, $300,000. Government grants, $20,268,692. Contributions from others, $3,086,517. Total financing, $58,750,013. Paragraph 13, that council received the following provided as part of the budget documentation: 15-year capital expenditure forecast, capital works in progress listing as of November 30th, 2020, and municipal reserve fund schedules continuity. And paragraph 14, that the city treasurer be authorized to include the approved budget estimates for 2021 in accordance with Public Sector Accounting Board reporting requirements as an attachment to the bylaw.
Okay, Councillor Chappell.
Your worship, I'd like to separate a number of those items from the vote. I certainly want to separate the operating budget from the capital budget. And I'd also like to propose an amendment that the operating reserve, working capital reserve, rather than to simply put any extra money into the working capital reserve, which we found was a cookie jar tonight for other spending, I think we should put a portion of that towards debt reduction directly.
Okay, so Councillor Chappelle, if I hear you correctly, you'd like to propose an amendment. Do you have that in writing?
I didn't even think of it. I was just, the way it was broken down in the budget tonight, I didn't have a chance to. So basically, rather than having all the money put into the working fund reserve, have 50% of that money go directly into debt reduction.
Okay, give me a minute, please. Yeah. So, okay, first of all, I was going to ask for a seconder. Before I need the seconder, I think I need it in writing. So, Councillor Chabot, can you just at least enunciate it clearly one more time? Then I will ask for a seconder. And if there's a seconder, then we'll have to recess until you can give it in writing so everyone can see it.
Certainly. So the variance that applies into the budget from what we're forecast to what we end up with sometimes an over contribution from the assessed value of properties, then we end up having extra. So understanding that, the premise is that any extra revenue goes into the working fund reserve. But I would rather see a portion of that, rather than going all into the working fund reserve, 50% of that go directly to debt reduction that the city has.
Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So perhaps I can just add a little bit of information to this. So we've had this motion in the budget recommendations probably for the last 5 years or so. It was initially put in because we did not have a very thorough system of tracking and estimating what our growth might be. And we today have a much better, much more comprehensive system working with the planning and building departments to be able to project what we think the growth will be, particularly in a year where we're holding off and not doing the budget to the new year, because then we know exactly what the growth will be. So while we left this in here this year for just in case there were any variances, I do not anticipate there to be any variance between what we projected for assessment growth and what the actual will be for 2021. Because we already had the assessed roll back prior to finalizing the budget numbers. So we won't have that particular variance for the 2021 budget.
That's very helpful, Ms. Kennedy. I will withdraw my motion on this particular issue for this year, but I would still like the motion to be broken up so I can vote on individual aspects of the budget.
Okay, so Councillor Chappelle has requested that we will do individual votes for each paragraph. So we will do that. So I'm going to ask if we can put up a thing up on the screen. People can have a look at the paragraph and then we'll call the vote and then we'll move to the next paragraph and so on. Okay, so if we can ask the clerks to put that back up on the screen, please. Okay, so paragraph 1. Okay, now we will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay. Next, paragraph 2. Okay. I can see the full screen. We'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, paragraph 3. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Paragraph 4. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Paragraph 9. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Paragraph 10. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Paragraph 13. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And now paragraph 14. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Okay, we have one more vote from this section of the motion. Councillors Boehm, Hutchison, Osterhoff, and Neal, you are excused. Okay, this is paragraph 15, and it reads that the necessary bylaws be established to formally adopt these estimates and be given all 3 readings at the February 16, 2021 meeting of council.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
And then
okay, so the only thing left then is clause 5 from the report from committee of the whole, which was with respect to the additional motion on options to reduce the cost of doing business. We will call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, so moving on to information reports. If you have any questions, just raise your hand as I read through them. Number 1, report on real estate transactions completed from July 1st, 2020 to December 31st, 2020 under bylaw number 2016-189. Number 2, public engagement annual update and updated implementation plan. Number 3, community safety and well-being planning interim report. Number 4, tender and contract awards subject to the established criteria for delegation of authority for the months of November and December 2020. And then number 5, Love Kingston Marketplace 2021 additional information. Okay, we have no information reports from members of council. Miscellaneous business, we have 2 motions. Number 1, that the resignation of Matthew McCartney from Heritage Kingston be received with regret. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Osterhoff, seconded by Councillor Chappell. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. And number 2, that the resignation of Chloe Godin-Jacques from the Municipal Accessibility Advisory Committee be received with regret. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Neal, seconded by Councillor Mclaren. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, on to new motions. We have 1 new motion this evening, moved by Councillor Hill, seconded by Councillor Boehm. The Municipal Act 2001 grants municipalities in Ontario the power to create and oversee business improvement areas, which are operated by a board of management for the purposes of promoting the district as a business or shopping area, as well as to provide enhanced improvements to amenities enjoyed by the public within the area, And whereas the City of Kingston created the Downtown Business Improvement Area in 1975 through the passage of bylaw number 8533, and whereas the powers granted to municipalities in Ontario under the Municipal Act 2001 include the power to pass bylaws related to the governance structure, financial management, accountability, and transparency processes of its local boards, including any business improvement areas. And whereas after initial discussions with city staff, the Board of Management of the DBIA on January 20th, 2021, passed a resolution to request the assistance of city staff in updating of the DBIA's present bylaws in accordance with best practices. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the City of Kingston direct the Acting Director of Legal Services to provide assistance to the DBIA in the revision of present bylaws with the further assistance of such municipal staff as deemed appropriate, and that the Acting Director of Legal Services report back to Council no later than the end of Q2 2021 with the report and updated bylaws for consideration detailing the revisions which have been developed by the DBIA and city staff. Councillor Hill, you have the floor.
Thank you. I won't be long. This is really just a housekeeping item. If you look at clause 2, the only bylaw that exists was the one that was created in 1975, which provided for the establishment of the DBIA. And really, for the past 30 or more years, the DBIA was under the directorship of Mr. Ritchie, who, as you know, recently retired in November. And that that retirement is sort of the DBIA to look at a number of things. They're reviewing their policies and procedures in general. But one of the things that was clearly hadn't been addressed and hadn't been looked at in a long time was the actual bylaw that is actually controlled by the City of Kingston and this council. So what it is looking to do is found in the third whereas clause, which is to implement into the bylaws governance structure, financial management, accountability, and transparency processes. So going forward, that these processes and the part of the governance structure are in place for the DBIA as it moves forward. So they requested it as a motion at the DBIA, and the city has been very involved, obviously, in assisting the DBIA with a number of their initiatives around governance and around accountability and policies and procedures, and we work very closely with them in any event. So it makes a lot of sense that Mr. McLeod be involved in this process, and they've requested that, and I think it's a necessary step for us in our relationship with the DBIA. So I recommend its approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chappell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. My question really relates to the fact that obviously, Mr. McLeod's time does not come free. There's a premium to be paid. And I'm wondering if the DBIA is going to pay for his time and services required to draft these new bylaws, or if that was contemplated at all.
So I see both Councillor Hill and CAO Hurdle would like to respond. Okay, CAO Hurdle.
Thank you, and through Mr. Mayor. So we do reviews of our bylaws or even our agreements. For example, we have a number of agreements with organizations like Tourism Kingston, Kingston Economic Development. So we do regular review of those, and we don't actually charge, obviously, the entity. And the reason for that is because there is a relationship between that organization and the city. So it is to our benefit as well to do these reviews regularly. This one, as Councillor Hill indicated, was done, the last time was done a really long time ago, and is definitely due for a review and an update.
And just if I may, Your Worship, add to that, this is in most of our partner organizations maintain their own bylaws. In this case, this is actually a City of Kingston bylaw.
Thank you for clarifying, Councillor Hill. That makes a lot of sense.
Is there anybody else that wishes to speak? Councillor Straub.
Thanks, Your Worship. Okay, so I'm a little confused. So now the executive director has resigned, has retired. There's internal review by DBIA of their governing bylaws, and they're asking for our help because we do this for on a regular basis. Now, why it? I understand what's being said, and I think it needs to be done, but I don't understand why it's been such a long time. If it's a City of Kingston bylaw, then we should be monitoring. I mean, everything else we do 5-year, updates and so on. So my question is to staff, is there a process in place for our external agencies that are set up the same as DBIA or otherwise, in which we may need to be doing bylaw reviews? And can we anticipate this rather than waiting for it to be brought up in this manner?
See you.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mclaren may want to add to this, but DBIA is one of the few where we actually have a city bylaw established to help with some of the governance there. And to be honest with you, Councillor Stroud, there was a review done a number of years ago of most of the organization agencies with which we have working relationships. So whether that's Townhomes Kingston at the time, Kingston Frontenac Housing Corporation. So there was a complete review done. I'm not sure why this one wasn't included in that review, but we can make sure going forward that the bylaw is updated the same way that we do for a number of other agreements that we have in place, including agreements like Tourism Kingston and Kingston Economic Development.
Thank you. I guess I'm happy that Councillor Hill is bringing this forward so that this can be done. And I'm happy with the explanation, and I'm happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will call the vote then on new motion number 1. Sorry, Councillor Baum, did you want to speak to it? Oh, okay. All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, are there any notices of motion? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Clerk, calls for minutes, please.
Moved by Councillor Osterhoff, seconded by Councillor Mclaren, that the minutes of City Council meeting number 5-2021 held Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021 be confirmed.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. We have some tabling of documents, a number of communications. Is there any other business? Mr. Clerk, calls for bylaws, please.
We have 6 bylaw votes tonight. The first are the bylaws dealing with the approval of the budget. For those votes, Councillors Boehm, Hutchison, Osterhoff, and Neal, you are excused. First of 3 bylaw votes, moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Mclaren, that bylaws 4 and 5 be given their first and second reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Mclaren, that clause 11.36 of bylaw number 2010-1 as amended be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaws 4 and 5 3 readings.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Mclaren, that bylaws 4 and 5 be given their third reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Councillors, you can return. We have 3 more bylaw votes to go. Moved by Councillor Osterhoff, seconded by Councillor Stroud, that bylaws 1 through 3 and 6 through 9 be given their first and second reading.
Those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
Moved by Councillor Osterhoff, seconded by Councillor Stroud, that clause 11.36 of bylaw number 2010-1 as amended be suspended for the purpose of giving bylaws 1 through 3 and 6 3 readings.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried.
And our final bylaw vote, moved by Councillor Osterhoff, seconded by Councillor Stroud, that bylaws 1 through 3 and 6 through 9 be given their third reading.
All those in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Okay, thank you. Motion to adjourn, please. Moved by Councillor Bohm, seconded by Councillor Neal. All those in favor? Opposed? And we're adjourned.